Good morning and welcome. I told Jonathan I would give him a 3-second introduction because I think that's all that is needed. He is the man of the hour, the man of the day. And we are delighted to have Pastor Jonathan Morgan here in these last days with us. Last day? Is it last day? Last day with us. So please give a round of applause and welcome.
Welcome. So good to see you all, your faces. Well, you know, I thought I would put together a slideshow because I like photographs, and it will help to give you an idea of, you know, what the journey has been like. But I need to introduce Jennifer Yoakum, who is here from the coast, but was the pastor up in Forest Grove.
And in Missoula, Montana.
And she preached here about a month ago or so. Yeah. There's more seats up front. And to be surrounded by colleagues these past 9 years, I've never had such great colleagues. You know, I've been in conferences, 3 different ones, and not all of them have been terrific as far as colleagues. Some of them can be rather jealous people. You would think that ministers would be supportive of one another. Not always, not always. But here I found, and this is a good example, the support of colleagues in this conference has been superb, and I've just enjoyed it so much that when I was the moderator of the conference, I got to know quite a few. So, well, I thought I would begin at the beginning, namely my family of origin. Can everybody see that okay? And because it has had a very big effect on who I am as a person. My parents were members of the United Church of Wilbraham, Massachusetts, where I kind of grew up. And that was a church that was both Methodist as well as UCC. It was both. Welcome. Sit down. It's good to see you. And my parents were wonderful people. And my dad, here's the story of my parents and their love together. My mom was a professional singer. She had her own radio show on the Hartford station of WTIC. And her show was called A Time for Romance. She was 19 years old, and she had a band, and she would sing love songs. And that's something. And my uncle, who was the minister, who's 8 years younger than my dad and my mom were 10 years apart. And my uncle and my mother actually dated back in high school and went to the prom together. I'm convinced if they actually stayed together, Don would be dead. But you know, because she couldn't tolerate his attitude, I guess. But my dad was a very kind gentleman. And when he was driving through Hartford at the age of 29, he heard my mother on the radio and drove straight to the station. And that began a romance. A Time for Romance worked. So, my dad was a sports-minded person, but as more than anything, I would describe my dad as a gentleman. He was just extremely kind and caring. My mom was exceptionally talented and emotionally challenged. She felt responsible for her brother's death. Her brother had spina bifida, and she was 2 years older than my mom. And my mom was put in charge of his care because there were 8 other brothers and sisters. And while in her care, At the age of 5, he died because of heat stroke. Spina bifida makes it hard to regulate your temperature. That had a devastating effect on my mom. And it really set her life, because in those days you don't ever counsel children, they'll get through it. But it really affected my mom badly. And I think she had a bit of a personality disorder, which came out in a variety of ways, rather explosive ways at times, and sometimes very hurtful ways. So my dad was the stable one. My mom was the bright light. She was a performer, and she was really quite something. But having children was a real challenge. My sister Janet says, this is my remaining sister, that when she was little, at the age of 2, and her sister, my sister Linda, was 3.5, my mom would lock them in the basement because she couldn't handle them. And this was not a finished basement. This was a basement. And she said it terrified her as a child. Needless to say, my 2 older sisters are also were very affected by mental illness, not helped by their treatment. So we had a family that was both filled with love and trouble. And when my sisters became older, they were nothing but trouble. You know, I said to someone the other day that I really didn't want to be a parent. Because in my household, pregnancies were not welcome. 5 times. And so I grew up with that, feeling, but I love being a parent. I really love it. And a grandparent, did I tell you I was a grandparent? We'll see pictures later. My dad and my mom really had a relationship that was extremely close, and they were reliant on one another. And my uncle, this is the minister. Now, just to give you an idea of Uncle Don, my predecessor at Simsbury, Connecticut, knew Don. And he said, you know, Don, he is the most authentic, pompous person I know. And I said, you're exactly right. He couldn't ever get down off his throne, even at home. Toggy, bring the paper to me. That's how he talked all the time. It used to drive us nuts in the family. And as I say, if my mother remained attached to him, she would have killed him. Because it was just too much to take. But I remember as a boy, that's me. I knew at this age that I wanted to be a minister. I think I was blessing him, or he was kissing my ring or something like that. He was Catholic. And so I had been telling my friends in high school, I want to be a minister. That's bravery for you. So I just knew that I was being directed that way. At a young age. In fact, my uncle was the first one to say, John, I think you have the makings of a minister. And I was probably 8, and I thought, you're nuts. I remember it. So, I met Lisa in high school at a minister's house during a youth fellowship meeting. She was 15, I was 18. Yes. And she just brought such energy into my life because she was very sweet and kind, and she didn't hang up on me when I said I wanted to be a minister on our first phone call. I I was all ready for her to say, I gotta wash my hair, I'm sorry. There we are. Leisure suits were big in those days. Don't you think? My nickname, literally, in high school, was FB, Fashion Buff. I used to wear things like that to school. Yeah, there's a word for it.
Do you still have that shirt?
Oh, I think I must, somewhere.
Wonderful.
I have others to go with it. So when we got married in 1981, we really were coming into ministry together, because she was even thinking of being a nun, because she was Catholic. She was thinking of being a nun. She was in a production back in New Bedford, Massachusetts. She was in The Sound of Music, but the priest hated my guts because I stole Lisa from the Catholic Church. Yeah, he didn't like me at all.
Did he like your shirt?
Let's get off the shirt. Jeez. Come on. So this is my mustache era, and so we just have been a team through the years. And as you know, we've had 1,200 people over to our house, and she loves it as much as I do. And before that, another 1,200 over in Simsbury, and another 200 or so in Belmont, because we just enjoy connecting with people. And Lisa loves the church, and she loves all of you. This has been hard. We've done a lot of crying over the past weeks. So, we have a wonderful family. And this is James, the father of Lily. Did I tell you? As I say, I didn't think I would enjoy being a father, and I adored my children, and I have a very close relationship with them. One of the things I do is I take them on separate trips. Like this year, I brought Laura up into Canada, and we like to do things individually so that I can have a time with each of them. And it's not easy being a preacher's kid. There's a reason for the nickname, PK. And I'll say this in the service later, or downstairs actually. My son, Nathan, this is Nathan. He's staying in Eugene with his very best partner, Tang. That's James, and his wife, Cara. That's Laura. When he was 3 years old, he was in the nursery, and I was finishing the service with my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Carl Schultz Jr., 6'5". He had a tendency to talk this close to you, and it was kind of a game we in the office used to watch and wait for people to back up, and hit the wall. So he was a threatening character, honestly. He had so much personal power, and he liked to use it. So we went to pick up Nathan at the end of the day. Nathan was alone in the nursery, and I picked him up, and as I'm picking him up, he sees Carl and bellows at him, "He's my father!" 3 times, "He's my father! He's my father!" And Carl's like, okay. He was claiming me. Because one of the things that preachers' kids realize is that they're sharing you. You're kind of the parent of a lot of kids. And so there's a degree of a threat. So being a preacher's kid can be a bit challenging. But they have been so supportive over the years, and I'm so grateful for that. And then my church family, you've been seeing some of the pictures, I think. I've truly enjoyed putting them together. This was the early years, and the youth group years. We had very large youth groups, as you can tell. That was probably, in some ways, the most satisfying ministry, because if you can help a youth, a young person, by correcting them just a little bit, the trajectory is huge. It really has a big effect. And in fact, many of the kids in these youth groups would write in their senior papers and in their applications for college about their experiences in youth group, because it was that life-changing. It was a lot of work. I would have 9 retreats a year. We had a church bus. And I'll tell you a quick story about the church bus. I had 3 fires in it and lost the brakes twice. And it would hold 60 plus kids. But the very first day of the bus was rather precarious, because I didn't realize they had sort of no rules when I took over the wheel. I like to drive, so I was the bus driver. And everybody piled on. The back of the bus had a huge rack for all the baggage. And I got everyone on board, I got behind the wheel, and I didn't realize that John Davidson had climbed through the back door and up the ladder and was adjusting the straps to make sure those bags stayed on. I didn't know it. So off I went with John on top. John is pounding on the top of the bus, trying to have us stop. Finally, it was only about a mile. One of the other youth said, "Where's John?" I said, "I don't know." He climbed down with bugs in his hair. I'll tell you one last story. Being on a search committee, you'll appreciate this. My first sermon, I think it was getting me back. He saw me coming out of the office, and he was going to go down the hall, but he opened the door for me. I thought, oh, isn't that nice? He's welcoming me, and he's going to support me as I go in for the first time. And I walked up the stairs. John was a big guy, and he looked at me and said, "Don't screw up or they're going to blame me." Now, every one of these faces is a story. Every single face. You know, the ministry it's a challenging profession, because you really get into people's lives. You know, I was talking to another colleague about this, and talking to Mark about this. I said, unlike a therapist who does something like it, there's all kinds of boundaries. The therapist. I remember seeing our therapist at the supermarket, and I turned around, and there she was, and I said, "Oh, hi, Mom, how are you?" And she was backing away from me like, "I don't know you, I don't know you." Because you're not supposed to. No, and there was a parishioner there. So, "Oh, here's our therapist, come in." We go towards our people. We call them on the phone. "How you doing? Do you want to get together? You seem like you're having a hard time." I remember one time I was at the market, and I didn't know her, but I was behind her, and I'm a pretty observant person, and I pick up things, in particular on those moments between the speaking times. when they let down. And so she was paying for her goods. She didn't know I was behind her, but I could tell. I could feel it. Something in her spirit said, she's in trouble. I didn't even know her. Never met her. I knew she was part of the church, but I was new to the church. So I followed her around to the car. Can you imagine it? Followed her around to the car. Tapped on her window. She gave me a big hello. How are you? I said, fine, fine. You doing okay? No. Not at all. And I walked with her for about a year. It was a tough year. And one of the things I learned early on, I don't see him in here, but was that you can only do so much. You know, I've been accused of caring too much about people, but what I want to do is be as close as I can. I know I can't change people's lives. I know that. But if I can help in any way, I try. And I know my limits. And I learned that the first year of ministry in Glastonbury, Connecticut. A member of my advisor team came to me and said, I need some help. My wife is divorcing me and I don't know why. There's a man in his 50s, very nice guy. He said, I went to the senior minister. He doesn't really listen to me. So I'm coming to you. I'm 23 years old, 25 years old. So I listened for a couple of hours. And I said, Bob, here's what I think. I can sort of piece things together as I listen. So I think this is what's happening. He said, you know, that's exactly right. That's what happened. Well, what do you think I should do? Now, I was young enough and stupid enough to say, well, I'll tell you. You're not supposed to do that. But I said, well, here's what I would suggest. You could do this, and you could do that, and you could do this. And I think it would make a difference. It's still early enough in the process. He said, you know, that's exactly right. That would do it. But I don't want to. Remember those moments? So my elation of, I did it, crashed into reality. I can only do so much as a pastor. I'll try really hard, but I can only do so much. So all of these faces bring me such joy. It's really amazing. And then, of course, the colleagues. That's Big Carl. Now, we're all on steps. Carl is not. It's my mom. And some of the colleagues. There's my Uncle Don, being pompous as usual. And that was my ordination. No, that was my installation. No, it was my ordination. One of them. And this is one of our teams. What that blotch is on Mark. Mark was an interesting guy. He was the musician, and he used to play as the keyboardist for 45 years for Max Creek, which is the Grateful Dead of the East Coast. In fact, they used to play together. He knew Jerry Garcia and all the rest.
Got one of his ties on.
He does. Right, he does. Very wonderful guy. So to work with these colleagues has been amazing. This is our youth pastor in Simsbury, Connecticut. He's still there. He's been there for 17 years. Huge youth ministry there. Wonderful guy. And another colleague. I had two colleagues in Simsbury. And of course, Lieutenant Melanie. This was actually on the day of installation. I have been blessed to work with all of these people. No no matter how they looked. It was a normal day. It wasn't even a holiday. I don't get it. And as I mentioned, youth ministry has been so important. This was my first youth group, first retreat. I'm down here. I think the bus didn't catch on fire that time, but it was just so much energy. I loved the energy. That was what was so amazing about it. And this was a youth event that I put on for Massachusetts, and again, the energy was amazing. And this was my favorite group. And Wendy and Scott are now in touch with me. In fact, Scott's picture is here. He's 55 years old. And that's his sister, who's 57. Man, I feel old. So youth ministry was so important to me because of the energy of working with the youth, feeling as though you're making a difference. It was a tremendous amount of work, but very much worth it. And you guys are teachers, you know, it's a lot of work. And it helped me in terms of learning what it's like to be a pastor. Because if you can win over a young person, then you've made some. Now, here's how much harder it is here, especially now. Mark will tell you, so will Gretchen. The relevance of religion, church, youth group has dropped so low. And part of that is because of the perception. You know, I had a confirmation class 6 years ago. They were a little challenging. And I said, okay, tell me, what don't you like about the church? And the two who gave me the most trouble said, we don't like that we can't tell any of our friends that we go here. Why? Because we are now associated with pedophiles or incredibly narrow-minded, judgmental. And it's so hard to break out of that mold. I had a conversation with a mother that was a member here for a while, and I said, I get it. You don't want to associate with that, but we're not that. She could not hear me. She didn't want us to talk about God. She didn't want us to talk about faith. It was confirmation. It's like going to the dentist and saying, don't touch his teeth. But that's the reality of today. That's why it is so hard. You know, people here are saying, we need our young families. Do you know how many churches are saying that right now? Every single one. Every one. It is a really challenging time to be the church. Very challenging time. And COVID only made it worse because parents had to do what they had to do for their children and find things for their children to survive. And we weren't meeting for 18 months. And we lost a lot of our families. Like every other church of our type. It's a tough time. There are ways to reach people. I won't get into that now, but there are ways. I really can. Jennifer knows. But we have to think outside the box. The old days of opening the door, come on in, ain't gonna happen. We have to go into the community. You do. So one of the things that I had to do quite a bit of was deal with loss. In the middle is Sally. She was the life of the party, obviously, and also the life of our church. Dick and Sally were Jim and Jean Brown. And Dick and Sally were in Napa Valley visiting their son and granddaughter, and they had them in the car, and they were stopped on the road around a corner, and a semi-tractor trailer didn't see them, came up behind them, tried to avoid them, punted them into oncoming traffic, and another tractor trailer crushed their car and killed them all instantly. That was a Saturday. I had to go to Sally's 36-year-old daughter and tell her that she lost her mom, her dad, her brother, and her niece. That was the night. And then the next day was service. Here's the thing about pastors. We have to be up there when we're feeling like hell. And I remember I was copying something in the office, and somebody came in the door behind me, and she said, "Oh, Jonathan, you're going to have to carry us now." And I thought, oh. And so what you need to do as a pastor is realize, I can't. But I think the Spirit can. And let's see what the Spirit can do. And so with that support, you get through things. In Simsbury, my very first month, I got word that James Stover, 7 years old, sweet boy, blonde, 3 sisters, was playing up against the clay cliffs of Block Island. And it was as if God had taken a boulder the size of a small car and dropped it on James. I never met them until that day, when I met Mom and Dad in the kitchen, and Mom had her hands in a bowl of soapy water that was bloody. And when she removed her hands, halfway up her fingernails was clay, in her desperate attempt to reach her son. We had 786 people for service for James and his family. It was my first month. Grief is our job. It really is, in a lot of ways. It's our job. Didn't even see you guys here. Just talked about you. Jane and Jim. It's so hard because you are our family. We love you. And so you really have to have a strong faith to do what we do. It's absolutely required. Absolutely. And I've buried over 550 people. And there are a lot of stories. And yet it's so important. Grief and loss is part of life. Like now. Like now. It's part of life. And then, of course, COVID ministry. Woo! You know, we talked, I think, Jennifer and I, about having to switch to something we haven't done before. And it was challenging, to say the least. And this is when we eventually met together, but it was outdoors until there were problems, and then we had to go back indoors again. Think about it, what we've been through. It's amazing anyone is here. Honestly, it really is amazing. Because this has been a horrific time, especially the church. We're at 60%, like almost every church I know, of what we were. 60%. That's hard. And we learned some skills. So this is just an example of what I would do on the computer. You know, there's different camera angles, there's a way to zoom in on things, and you add. So this is what you're able to do on a regular computer. Thank God. It really has been a very interesting time. And we have an opportunity to use that ministry as part of the future. David has a quote for what it would require to put together a more robust effort for video ministry. And the equipment is one thing. That's the easy part. What we need is someone to say, I'm not afraid of this. I'm going to learn, and it'll be part of my ministry. Because guess what? It is. When we were putting things on Facebook and sending it out, we promoted our videos. In 2020, our Palm Sunday service saw 6,000 views. Wow. In this area. It's a way to get the word out. Now, Facebook determined that we were Russian or something because they shut us down. I don't know why. And so we couldn't get anything back onto Facebook back in early 2021. But there's a lot that can be done. There really is. So it's something to think about. I catch up here. So, walking with others has been so important. And Stan Payne is here. And his elder ministry, the elder council, was unique and surprisingly rare in the church. You would think the church would be doing this all the time. And it really made a big difference. And for those of you who are here for the Third Act's lunches and programs, we had at one point 120 people. We averaged about 75. That was so important. To be something to think about in the future. This is the only picture I got because we never did take a picture of the Seekers group. Robin and I. And Amy. So this was an effort. Amy, Robin, myself, and Erica Towie got together and we talked first about what might we offer, knowing that people in particular out there don't identify Christian. They're spiritual, but they're sort of keeping Christianity at bay. So we talked about what we might do. And then we thought, no, let's just do it. So we had a small group to do it, which included Don Gall and Mark and who else? I'm trying to remember who else was in the group. Oh, Wendy from the Methodist Church. Yana. And it was a way for us to talk about things that mattered. You know, how many times do you go to church? How's the weather? Very good. How are you doing? Fine. It was a way to really talk about what matters. And then we extended it, Robin and Jean and I extended it to the church. And some of you are here now. And I've heard it said by more than one person, it's the most important thing I did in church, including Mark. Because it matters. Thank you, Robin. The heart of seekers. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Don. And then, of course, being active. These are my active shots. And of course, one of the ways we were active was the housing initiative. And it was really a stretch. Now, many of you don't know the history. It wasn't something that I came in with, I'm going to do a housing initiative. It's not my style. We brought together the board, the foundation, which was called at the time, and the mission committee. And we said, what can we do to be relevant in this community? And after 3 sessions, we decided housing. You probably know that in this community, we have the highest level of unhoused in the country per capita. The highest level. Not 2, 1. So I said, good idea. And there was a 2-phased effort. And frankly, it was all set to fail. Because there wasn't support initially. We were looking at $60,000 that we eventually raised almost $300,000. But we were looking at the first phase of around $60,000. And Jean Stover decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to quit. And in a weekend, she raised half the money. Thus, what can happen? And then a committee worked so hard. If you're on the housing committee, would you raise your hand? There's, I think, 12 of you, Brenda? I can't remember altogether. Some have moved away, but that was an enormous amount of work. I can't tell you how many hours they went in. We had to change the laws in the town. It took us 9 months to do that. We raised almost $300,000 at kind of the drop of a hat. It took us, 5 weeks to raise over 200? It's amazing. Now, was it perfect? No. Not at all. Those homes are empty right now. Because we had to have a strategic pause. Because things that were originally thought to be possibly effective turned out not to be. The folks in those homes were too vulnerable. They weren't able to handle this kind of exposure, and they acted out. And St. Vincent de Paul and we discovered the hard way that that's the case. So, in 2 weeks, those homes will be occupied again, according to St. Vincent de Paul. But now we're going to go with sort of the next level of folk that are in need, namely those who are looking for affordable housing at the 60% median income level. Because we feel as though they will not be as vulnerable. That's the hope. You'll hear more after I'm gone, but that's the hope. Now, as I said, was it perfect? No. Do I regret it? No. You can't do something really important and big and not risk a lot. And you learn. And we did. So, the future. People have been asking, what are you doing? And I've been trying to figure out what my role might be. How can I use my gifts? I was thinking of Speaker of the House, but that's probably filled for 2 months. So maybe. But my son said, I think I have something for you. There's a role in the movies that you might be able to fill. Why were you laughing?
Because it looks perfect.
But he has more hair.
I want you to know that he wore a toupee. Of course, the main answer is being closer to our grandchild. I didn't realize how much fun, and I've determined why. It's because the pressure is off. You don't feel like I'm going to kill the child today, and you're panicked. And so what you do is you try your best to just support your loving children and enjoy your grandchild. And boy, is she fun. She really is a lot of fun. And so although I will be doing some type of ministry, it'll be a lot less robust. There's a lot of churches, frankly, in need. And there are part-time, interim type things that can be, I think, a way to sort of ease myself into retirement. I'm going to be looking at those very seriously. But eventually, retirement. I'm looking forward to that. And my son drew something that I think really this is Lily.
Yeah.
She has the key to the door to the future. And these are the churches I've served, the paintings of the churches I've served. You put the drawing board in, back to the drawing board. The UCC symbol there. A lot of crumpled papers. This is actually one of 2 videos. He has another one with me in front of a blank wall with the same outfit, with a paintbrush in my pocket and paint cans around me, and I'm looking at a blank wall. And I entitled it Sermon Writing. So I look forward to something new, something exciting. But I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. So, any questions? Bill has one.
I have an answer.
Oh, you have an answer?
And what comes to mind is one of Jesus' comments, ask and ye shall receive. You've been giving for decades. Now you can ask, what should I do next? And maybe there are good answers in your church. My suggestion is consider teaching students of the ministry. You've got a wealth of information, and just go in and not have to score reports or papers or anything else, but just find a minister or find a professor that is young but doesn't have the decades of experience that you have, and share your experiences so that the young that are learning can benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you, Bill. I know the dean at Ann Arbor Newton Theological School. In fact, that's where Avron is. And she and I are already in touch about that, to be able to do some sharing, because one of the things that seminary doesn't teach you is how to be a minister. It says a lot about the Bible, and it says a lot about everything else, but it doesn't teach you how to be a minister. It really doesn't. The number of people that drop out of the ministry is extremely high within the first 3-4 years. who just leave the ministry. Most of my colleagues that I went to school with are out of the ministry now. I had 4 of the best ministers in my home for the September meeting, and most of them were out of the ministry now. Either retirement or just said, no, I'm going to go counseling route. So yeah, I think to be persistent at this job takes something. And at least I'm persistent. The other thing I thought of was, I said this to another friend of mine who's the area minister of this huge conference that we'll be going into. So the Southern New England Conference has 814 churches. We have 40 here. Because every town has at least one UCC church. And so Patty and I have already talked about the fact that ministers don't get enough support. They just don't. I was talking to Tyler about this. And it's because the conference staff is doing so many other things, usually in crisis mode. And retired pastors don't do a very good job at supporting those who are pastoring. And I said, use me, send me to a church to meet with a pastor who needs someone to walk with them. And then we can set up a team. You know, as a nurse, Lisa said, I'm sure you feel this way too, Amy, you know, you need support to do that kind of care, and how could we do it and make a difference? So that's another thing I'll do. Brenda, I think you had your hand up. Were you going to say something?
I was thinking you'd be a great Tesla advisor in your shirt.
She's actually onto something. I was buying the Tesla. Now, I know a lot about cars. I'm kind of nuts about cars. If you know me, you know that. And so, I'm in the car thinking, this is a little scary, because everything's on that one screen. And I looked over and there was a couple there in their 80s, and I thought, oh my God, those poor people have no idea what they're doing. I know of someone that drove home their brand new Volvo, put it in the garage, they couldn't start it for 2 weeks. They had to call in the dealer to show them how to do it. Yes, I thought I'd be an advisor for those who are going into electric cars and teach them what is needed. So, yes, exactly. Well, we have work to do. Cynthia and I have work to do. Unless there's another quick question. Just thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.